Hello and welcome. My name is Alexia and I'm here with Mars Lord, and we're going to have another one of our conversations today, all about speaking up and standing out. So just before we kick off, maybe we're just going to introduce ourselves very quickly. So I'm the host of the Fear-Free Childbirth and Motherhood podcast. Mars, who are you?
I'm Mars Lord, coach, birth activist, doula educator, and lover of red wine and red meat.
I love it. I love it. So we are also coaches and we support birth workers, birth professionals, but also I also support just business owners in building their business, expanding their reach and expanding their income. So we're going to be talking today about speaking up and standing out and really helping us to unravel what that is, because I think there's a lot of confusion about what that is and how people can do that even more. So, but before we do kick off that conversation, I do just want to highlight that we're running some masterclasses on the back of these conversations that we've been having. So we've been following these conversations that Mars and I have been having for, what is it, about 2 months now, where we've covered, we started off with toxic kindness, then we talked about, we had a Black Lives Matter conversation, Black women in birth, and also we talked about, what was the other one, being cheap, and how being cheap is bad for birth as well. And so what we found is on the back of those conversations, it really did kick off quite some in-depth conversations, and people really wanted to go much further than that. We were inundated with messages all over the socials, on Instagram, everywhere. I know you were getting a load of messages, Mars, about with people that just want to take these ideas, these concepts, and really integrate them fully and really take them on board in a meaningful way, in a way that we simply can't do over just a simple conversation on Facebook. So we've decided to come up with a masterclass experience over 1 month that we're going to be running. We are still putting the finishing touches to it. So it's very exciting. And we have got a wait list. So if you do want to be on the list to find out when that gets announced, then you need to get yourself on the wait list. So I will be sharing a link in the comments, so do look out for that. So let's kick off the conversation then, Mars. Now we've got a few people watching, so it'd be really good if you can just hop onto the comments and tell us who you are and where you're at, so we can say hi. But also, I think a great place to start with this conversation, which we were just chatting a little bit before we came on, was, what is speaking up and standing out not? Like, it's massively misunderstood. So what is it not? So do you want to kick off some of your thoughts on this, Mars?
So, I often get told by people, oh, well, I can't do that because I'm not bold, I'm not loud, I can't be loud about these things. I like to do things quietly. And I still haven't worked out why speaking up means you have to be loud and boisterous. I know my personality. I know that I'll tell people to sit the fuck down and get out of the way if necessary. But you don't have to talk like that. You and I are two different people and have similar and different ways of doing exactly the same thing. So speaking up is not about having to have my personality, having to have my way of doing it. And standing out isn't about wearing your bright blue lipstick or, it's none of those things. I think there's this common misconception that standing out means eclipsing everything around you. And I think that's a very common misconception. What about you?
Yeah. And I before I started doing birth work, I was a personal brand coach. So I'd really help people to understand who they are and then stand out, so they could get the business they wanted. And so this is something I've really dived into quite a lot. And one of the things a lot of people did think it was about being outrageous or being noisy or doing things that are attention grabbing, and anything like that is just coming from the wrong energy. It's coming from a very needy energy, which has the opposite effect and kind of almost pushes people away, because they kind of almost go, oh, what is going on there? Because it doesn't have, energetically, it doesn't carry the right kind of energy. And so really, for me, it does go back to being authentic and being true to who you are. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't really know who they are. And that was where I would start a lot of the work that I would do with people, is helping them to reconnect to who they are, minus all the fears and judgments and criticisms that they would bring to that. Because believe me, I call this stuff head trash, and we have a lot of that stuff that prevents us from connecting to who we truly are. I'm just going to hop to the comments. We've got Wilma, hello, she's an antenatal teacher from Slough, and we've also got Amanda, who's a doula maternity engagement action in Birmingham. So thank you for joining us. So yeah, tell us, what do you think standing out and speaking up is? And I want to go back as well to the speaking up thing, Mars, because sometimes you see a lot of Facebook posts like this and they drive me insane, because there are some people that think that speaking up is about saying what they truly think in that moment. And actually that just means they're just being a bitch and they're not being kind or they're not being respectful. So it's not always about just not staying quiet on something, although it is about that at the same time. It is and it isn't. And it depends, I think, what intention or energy you're bringing to that interaction that really helps people to figure out whether you're hitting the right note with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And also there's a level of bravery that should come with it, particularly if you're speaking up about something that you don't normally speak up about. And I think people get really frightened that they're not going to be loved or liked if they say something. And then they're, like you said, the ones that take it to the other extreme and say, well, I don't care if you like me or not, I'm going to say this, without actually considering the audience that they're saying this to, the space that they're in, that they're saying it to, and whether or not their words will cause harm in that moment. They're just, no, I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it, you know. Yeah. And that's not what speaking up is. No, that's the opposite of what speaking up is, because that's about obliteration. That's not about conversation.
And just within the context of birth, because I know we're going to have a lot of birth workers watching this because of the work that we both do. And I think the speaking up, we've touched on the speaking up part of this when we had our conversation about toxic kindness and how it's important to speak up where things need to be said. Yes. And if you are keeping quiet when a voice needs to express something, whether it's your voice or somebody else, you're speaking up for somebody that can't speak up in that moment, and something needs to be said because of the situation that's unraveling or that's unfolding, then it absolutely is relevant and appropriate to be speaking up. And then this is the kind of stuff that does require that bravery that you just talked about, because sometimes speaking up in those situations may not be perceived as kind or thoughtful, because maybe somebody else might have their nose put out of joint. Maybe it's going to create an uncomfortable silence. Maybe people are going to say, oh, you can't say that's not right. But actually it needs to be said, because there are some norms that need to be smashed through and things need to be changed and people need to be woken up a bit to how things are today. And so I realise what we've talked about already is we're conflicting ourselves already, aren't we? On the one hand, we're saying you mustn't speak up because of all the wrong, because of all the things we said. But we're also saying you have to do that because it needs to be said.
Which is why it's important to understand what you're saying, why you're saying it, and who you're saying it to, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no point in people make me laugh and say, well, I'm going to play devil's advocate. And what they actually mean isn't that they're going to play devil's advocate. What they mean is, well, I'm going to say this and it's going to upset you, but so that you don't get upset with me, I'm going to tell you that I'm playing devil's advocate. When actually what I'm speaking is what I truly believe.
Yeah. And they're not owning what they believe. And they're putting in these distances, this disconnect, so they don't have to own it, and they can deflect rather than standing in their truth, standing in their power by owning fully what their opinion is. We've got Lisa. Some words have different connotations. The word normal can mean so many different things. Normal in inverted commas. Yeah, normal. What is normal? I hate that word.
Well, especially when you consider that the world that we live in, and normal is different for different people. Normal for you and I are two completely different things, because when someone white talks about normality, they're talking about whiteness. Whatever whiteness does is normal. Everything else is other. So people are othered. And so we need to be careful of the context in which we're using words like normal. And what does normal mean? Is normal really that tiny, narrow path? Or is it a much wider, much bigger normal that takes in things that perhaps you or I haven't considered? Doesn't mean everything goes, but it means that there are experiences and real life experiences that we don't take into consideration because they never touch us.
Exactly. They're outside of our experience, but they appear as they are normal for many other people's life experiences. And so it's these variations of normal that we come across, which is a term we hear a lot within the context of birth as well.
Yeah.
And I think this idea of normal is, and especially now that people are talking about the new normal, which is a term that really does annoy me even more than the word normal today, because of the situation, the whole what we're living through right now, these crazy times. So we've also got Fiona, who's with us, antenatal teacher and chair of Buckinghamshire Maternity Voices. So going to those that are watching, we've got quite a few people watching. Let us know, what do you think speaking up is about for you? Because we want this to be a conversation. This isn't just about Mars and I sharing what we think it is. We just want to kind of hold this space so that we can all have this conversation and unravel it, because I think it's a very relevant thing for us to be talking about and bringing to the surface, because speaking up as birth professionals, as women as well, and people who are holding the space for families to evolve into, to have more in their family, you know, as they are growing as individuals, I think is something that we all need to be grasping a little bit more about, so that we can speak up more and represent those people in a fair way. Lisa saying, completely with you, the language of childbirth is very complex. Do you want to add anything to that, Mars, about the language of childbirth being complex?
Well, yes, I mean, the language of childbirth is all based on medical books and medical curriculums, isn't it? Even in the doula trainings, etc., that are out there, they talk according to this is how birth works. But birth doesn't work in the same way for everyone. And the wider connotations are, particularly when we look at the maternal mortality statistics, that what is normal, what is ordinary birth language for one, could mean a life sentence or a death sentence to another. And so we look at these narrow curriculums, these narrow fields of thought, and we say, this is how it should be. I mean, I was at a talk and someone was talking about decolonizing contraception. But the language that they used when they were talking about decolonizing contraception was all the language of the colonizer, poo-pooing different ideas. That's not, I don't believe in that traditional Chinese medicine rubbish. And so, hold on, if we're decolonizing a system that speaks in a white Western centric way, why is the first thing that we do to get rid of everything that isn't white centric and Western? So the language can be complicated, but it's only complicated because we don't allow ourselves to stretch our vocabulary, to stretch our thoughts, to stretch our research, to stretch our learning.
And I think a lot of that comes from social media, where we create these bubbles where you are friends with like-minded people and you start just being exposed to similar ideologies to your own. And anybody that doesn't agree, you know, you get a lot of people that are very vocal on Facebook, for example, about people that don't agree with them, and they will just get blocked and defriended. And so these polarities, these kind of bubbles of you end up just kind of aggregating alongside very similar people, so you're not being exposed to many of these new ideas and new ways of thinking in the way that maybe we would when you would buy a newspaper and you'd flick through the whole newspaper and you'd decide on which article you wanted to read. Yes. Now you don't get to, you're not exposed to those other articles now, because you're just being very filtered in the way that you're taking in new information. And I think that's can be quite damaging in terms of new ideas penetrating.
Well,
society.
And it means that your actual ideas, your own ideas, can't be challenged.
Yeah.
But by the same token, they also can't be reinforced. Because sometimes it's hearing that polar opposite or even that dissenting voice that makes you think, actually, no, I'm right in this position I'm taking. That what you're saying really affirms the things that I believe, because you're highlighting all the things that I don't. So you're right, we fall into our little protective bubbles and just stick with those people and hope that, we're not going to be uncomfortable if we do that, are we?
And I think the other thing is when you post something on social media, when you're worried, a lot of people are worried that people won't agree with them. And so there's a fear of being disagreed with. And then that can go a little bit further, where people might be very vocal and you might get People could the keyboard warriors come out and they really start maybe being quite vitriolic or quite attacking. And I've been on the receiving end of quite a lot of that. And I know it's not pleasant. And to create some kind of, to not allow that to get to you does take a little bit of practice, is probably not the right word, but getting used to it for sure.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are worried that if they share something and people don't agree with them, it's how do they handle that disagreement? How can we comfortably have a conversation where we're not agreeing and we are pushing each other to help us better understand our own position we will agree to disagree kind of in a nice way, as opposed to...
You need to know where you stand. If you know where you stand, if you are secure in your standing, then a little bit of vitriolic wind or a troll-like storm coming at you isn't going to shake you, because your foundation is good. And if you're saying something because it's on trend, it's the thing to say, like, oh my goodness, we're talking the world of birth, and what we're talking about a lot at the moment in birth is, black women are more likely to die. This is terrible. Tell me, where do you get that information? What are your statistics? Well, I just know that it's terrible. So now you have nothing to stand on as you're being battered, and so you fall. But if you go and you do the reading and you do the research and you think, oh my gosh, actually black women are 5 times more likely, and here are the reasons why. And it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, brown, and different, whatever you are, if you don't understand where you stand and why you stand there, then this is why those things matter to you the most, because you're being battered by them. Have you noticed that the ones that get attacked by trolls that stand firm are the ones who just don't shift their position, and they can back it up and say, because this is why, because this is why. And the ones that get battered are the ones that have jumped onto a cause without investigating the cause and without truly embedding it within themselves and their hearts and their souls and their knowledge. And they're just saying, which is why performative allyship is just ridiculous. Let me quickly jump up and show that I'm allied with these people by saying these things. Well, why do you believe those things? Well, they say these things. Yes, but why do you believe these things? Well, they say those things. But why do you believe? Oh, why are you getting at me? This isn't fair. I'm just trying, and I'm doing my best to be, an ally, to be a friend, to be a supporter, and all you're doing is attacking me. And you're only feeling attacked because you don't actually know the position that you're taking. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and just take this, let's move it even more inward into a more personal position. We've got some ideas that are being discussed a lot, and going to Black Lives Matter, that's one that a lot of people have jumped on recently. But more in terms of standing up for what you believe in and who you are, I think we need to be clear on who we are as individuals and what our own position is on, what our own personal values are and where our boundaries lie and what our standards are and where we are willing to say no to that. Yes, I'm okay with that. And really on a personal note, really, because that's really where your solid core foundations are, is when you're super, super clear on who you are as an individual, what matters to you, and where you are unshakable, where there's non-negotiable aspects, and where there are areas where you're willing to learn, willing to flex, willing to, learn and be open to new ideas. And I think that's where a lot of people maybe think they know who they are, but I think they don't truly know who they are. And this is the bit that, if you can get it right, really does help you to, 1, speak your truth, and 2, stand out in a really powerful way that is unshakable, that won't get touched by trolls. And I think that's almost like, that's where we want to get a lot of people to, because I think when you're in that place, you don't feel the need to attack and to defend in such a strong way, because you're just quietly confident with who you are and where you're at.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with being uncomfortable in the conversation, because what that discomfort does, or what that discomfort should be doing, is making you reassess and reevaluate why you think the things that you do. So it's not about, oh my God, I'm going to be wrong on the internet. It's about, what do you believe? Oh, this is challenging me. Is this what I truly believe? Oh, maybe I need to adjust my position, because actually I've been too entrenched in this. And there's a bit more of that I need to take on board. So this is uncomfortable because I've been saying, this is my truth. And now I'm learning that my truth is slightly different. So now I have to reestablish within myself who I am, how I'm standing, and what I'm saying.
And be okay with maybe being wrong. Because some people don't like being wrong, and they will defend their right to be right and dig themselves into a bigger hole rather than going, you know what, I was wrong with that. And now you've made me rethink that. Thank you. I've now updated my position. I've changed my position to really, and a lot of people don't want to be wrong. They hate the thought of being.
No, and especially as we're talking about the birth world, within the birth world. So there's an organisation within the birth world who a couple of years ago, when people started asking questions about black mortality, archived and closed down their group. And then when they reopened it and someone said, okay, so now can we talk about these black mothers and their stats? We're told you can only say nice and kind things, you're breaching our standards. Fast forward 2 years, and under a new iteration or a different branch of their work, they are doing all sorts of BAME activities, things for BAME people. And when confronted on it and saying, well, listen, hang on, you caused real harm and damage within the birth world with what you did, they said, well, we had a death threat, so that's why we closed it. Mm-hmm. So there's no, we handled that really badly. There were some things that happened, but they could have been dealt with in a different way, but we didn't have to. We shouldn't have shut down the conversation. Mm. So what we've done is we're doing some learning. We've done some learning, and that's why we are now moving in this new direction. But instead they're like, shh, just don't talk about that. Have a convenient excuse for why we behaved so badly. But we weren't wrong because we had this death threat. And now let's pretend to be somebody new. And that is a very dangerous and weak position. Because it shows that there's no learning and there's no solid foundation in the work that they are doing now, because they are unable to root out or sort of get rid of the rot at the root of who and what they are.
And no transparency either. No sort of opening up and going, this is how we're changing. I think the transparency when you are rethinking where you're at goes a long, long way to bring your audience with you. And we've got Emma who's commented, I completely agree with being confident in yourself and your practice, then you can take criticism and learn from what others are saying. I'm a midwife and find some other colleagues struggle to develop and take new research on board, etc., because they are scared and not confident in their own practice, or they are worried about the outcome, despite the research showing otherwise. I feel I've got a rant coming on about research within hospital environments, because I do feel that the research doesn't really seem to be considered fully in. You'll be a lot more experienced on this one, Mars, than I am. But, the idea of research being considered fully within a hospital environment does seem like a very far-fetched idea.
Well, you see, that the whole point of the research is that it makes you look at your practice and you think, okay, firstly, the first question always to ask is, who has produced this research and what is its
and who paid for it?
Yeah,
if so there is somebody who paid for it.
Who's the one that researched it and what is its end goal? Now, if this is good research, if this is proving to be good research, then you need to investigate it and find out how it works in your practice. And so it's hard when you have somebody that refuses to do that because they don't want to change from the position. Well, I remember a doctor telling one of my clients, she asked him, she had twins, she was exclusively breastfeeding twins, and one of the twins got bronchiolitis. And he told her that she had to give the twin with bronchiolitis artificial milk. And she said, well, I don't want to because I'm breastfeeding. And he said, well, you have to do this because otherwise we need to measure how much milk goes in, and we can't measure how much milk goes in if you feed the baby at your breast. She said, well, then I'll express it and we'll do it that way. And he said, well, no, because, it crosses into the lungs. And she said, well, what do you mean it crosses into the lungs? Can you give me evidence? Listen, this is the way I have always done this. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've always done it this way, and I will continue to do it this way. You need to get on board. Of course, it turns ending the story very quickly, it turns out that his hospital was part of a formula milk trial.
Yeah.
you know.
Enough
But so
said.
he had no research and just fell back on his, well, this is how I've always done
Yeah.
it, and therefore this is right.
Very damaging. Very damaging. Fear. Go on.
Yeah, but and then a very new revelation, newish revelation, is about milk sinuses in breast tissue that don't exist. So early science said it did, but what research has shown and new science has shown is that they don't. And people are like, what? So what you do is you go and find out about it. Find out the veracity of it. Find out who has done these studies. Find out why they are being told, and then use it to inform your practice. But of course, if you don't want to change, you won't engage with the research and decide whether or not the research is good or bad. You know.
A lot of people don't like to change because a lot of people got a fear of change.
Yes.
And so that keeps a lot of people stuck in their current position, no matter what that is, whether that's a routine within a hospital environment, your working day, or whether that's where you're at emotionally with who you think you are. This idea that if I change things now, then I'm going to have to get used to stuff. There's going to be things that are going to be new to me. What if I can't cope? What if I can't handle it? Right now, I know I've got this whole thing under control, I think, because it controls an illusion. If it changes, then I'm going to lose it all. And it brings up a lot of fear.
Yes, it's more than that. It's not just the fear of failure. It's the fear of what the hell happens if I succeed.
That is massive.
And that's something I talk about a lot in my my coaching practice.
Yeah,
the fear of success alongside the fear of failure, because that means if you're trapped in that place, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I want to move forward, but what if I move forward and I'm successful? What will that mean? How does that upend my life, etc.?
Yeah.
But somehow we teach ourselves, or we are taught and we continue to teach, that being right is the only position to take, is the only place to be in, which makes us rigid and solid, and we become like concrete blocks. We're unable to adapt and change.
But right, just like bad, doesn't carry any meaning whatsoever. No thing is right. No thing is bad. Everything has got a bad and a good side. And sometimes we just see the bad side and we don't appreciate that there's a good aspect to that. And we touched on all of this really when we talked about kindness and toxic kindness, yes, and how the negative aspect of kindness and how it can be so damaging and so toxic, whereas the perception is that kindness is a good thing. And not a lot of people realise that it can actually be a bad thing too. And I think the same goes for right. There's a lot of things that are perceived to be right. And again, we can drag this further into sort of controversial territory with what is currently the law or what is morally right versus what is wrong and what is criminal. You know, these lines that are drawn are very... they're not lines at all. They're just lines in the sand. We can just kick them over because they don't really mean anything. And so this, I think, boils down to who you are, what you believe in. It goes back to you again, doesn't it? And what is right for you as an individual.
Always. Because it can't go anywhere else, can it?
No.
You know, only you and I can decide to have this conversation. Someone else might say to us, I really think you two should have a conversation about it. And we're like, no, not feeling it, not doing it.
Yeah.
But if you and I say, actually, that's a really good idea. I believe in that. Yeah. Actually, should we talk about that? So then we make a decision because it's something that we believe in. Not that it's something that Jocasta has said, I really feel you should talk about this and you should talk about this in this way.
Yeah. If you talk about this, you'll get loads of follows and it'll get shared loads and you'll get loads of business from it. No, because that's coming at it from very much the wrong place. It's like, no, I just want to talk about this. I just want to have this conversation because it's something I just want to say. And I just want to express how I feel about this thing. Because that's coming from truth. Rather than I'm doing this because I will then be perceived like this and people will like me. People, if you engage in those kind of conversations or doing those kind of activities to build a business, you're not doing it from a place of truth, and therefore it's going to just have the wrong energy about it, and people are just not going to watch it, engage with it, care about it.
We know the people who are speaking to us, to use a well-coined phrase, authentically. We know the people who are talking to us from a place of knowledge and of truth, because it settles in us. It makes us uncomfortable, perhaps. It makes us feel good and just about it. And we know the ones who are just paying lip service because we just sort of agree, but we forget about it 2 minutes later because actually they haven't told us anything of any substance. They've built their house on sand and it just blows away.
Yeah.
Because there's no foundation to it, apart from the ones who build it on rock so that it's all set and solid, so that when the trolls come, when the we don't like your opinions come, you're able to stand, strong, because you know that the teaching that you've gotten has come from a good, solid place and isn't just sort of picked up for the minute. Oh yeah, this is a trend. When that reality star or presenter died, and suddenly it was hashtag be kind.
Oh yeah. And
the hashtag be kind was trending at a time when I was talking more and more about toxic kindness.
Yeah.
And how kindness is used to silence and erase. And people were like, no, you've got to be kind, you've got to be kind, you've got to be kind. But they were saying it because that was what you said. Not because they understood what kindness meant in its fullness, which of course we totally talked about in our very first conversation, what kindness actually means and what kindness doesn't mean.
Yeah. I just want to go back to those watching and just want to ask you, like, when it comes to I just want to focus a little bit on standing out. Like, what do you think standing out means to you? And specifically in your work, so that you can be standing out for the right reasons. Whether if you're in an organisation, standing out so that you get the promotion, you get recognised, you get the award, you get put on the team, the committee, that kind of thing. Whereas if you have your own business, what does standing out mean for you? And how do you know that you are standing out? I'd be really interested to hear what people think about what do you believe that you need to do in order to stand out? Because I think that it would just be interesting to hear, because I think some people, there's one area where I think it's definitely around about how you treat people and how people's direct experience of being with you, of being treated by you, of engaging, communicating with you is this huge piece. But there's also your reputation, how people respond to you when you're not there. What do they believe about you? What do they say about you when you're not actually present? And how you go beyond your physical presence with your actual full presence. Am I making sense?
Yeah. And what happens when you inadvertently rock the boat? So you're sailing along quite nicely. People love and respect you, and they think you're okay. And so whatever you say goes. Except you're very careful about what you say, because you don't want to stand out so that suddenly yours is the bright red boat in a sea of yellow boats. And someone says, wait, you just said, whoa, that's challenging my thinking and my status quo. So again, we go back to comfort, which we talk about all the time. Are you going to rock that boat by standing out? And is that what stops you from standing out?
A lot of people don't want to rock that boat because they don't want to be kicked out of the tribe, where maybe their community, maybe it's simple as a Facebook group, maybe it's your professional organisation, maybe it's your peers, and
maybe it's your speaking tour, maybe it's your next book that people won't buy, maybe it's your ability to appear at conferences and be sort of, maybe it's your number of Twitter followers or your number of Instagram or Facebook followers that you don't want to say anything to cause that to dip.
And we had that a lot come up in the last conversation, didn't we? A lot of people saying when they did start supporting Black Lives Matter and talking more about that they lost a lot of engagement and followers with their social channels. And so they are seeing things like that happen, and that is a real worry for them when that is linked to maybe their revenue or their ability to get booked.
But then you need to look long term rather than short term. So this is the short term pain as you are building your brand, your word, your work experience to be inclusive of all, to be truer to who you are and what you believe. Because actually, then you'll find that the people that come to you are the ones that like to hear your truth.
Yeah.
And maybe the ones that dropped off so quickly were never truly following you anyway. They were just following the current hashtag.
Exactly. And I think when you do start expanding not expanding who you are, but refining who you are so that you're basically becoming a more concentrated version of you, not less diluted with all the crap and more you, then people will fall by the wayside because you're basically allowing those that don't resonate to just drop away, but leaving space for those that do resonate. So you have some hardcore fans within your tribe, and maybe that's a smaller group, but they're going to love you or they're going to leave you. And you'd much rather have lovers and leavers than people that just go, not really bothered either way about you.
Actually aren't engaging with you
Exactly.
at all.
They're just adding to the numbers and not really creating part of that energetic system that is you and your tribe. So I think to welcome the unsubscribes from your email list, the unfollows from your Instagram account, because it just shows that you're just having a more concentrated version of your tribe. And I want to go back to some of the
doing it right.
Yeah, exactly. I want to go back to some of the comments. We had some comments come in. Nick Shepherd, I feel like it's something I have had to make a conscious decision to do recently, to try and say what I believe in. When I first started, I worked for another company and there was very much a feeling of having to toe the party line and appeal to everyone. I teach antenatal hypnobirthing. This is a general feeling until recently that you don't want to offend. Now, I want to pick on to the word offend, because I think being offensive is a really great... I love the idea of being offensive, because I could say a swear word now and offend millions of people, but I could also...
did right at the beginning. They switched off immediately.
Exactly. But then you could also bring in a lot of people. And so actually being offensive, there isn't, again, it's like, there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. With offensive, you could, I could wear a really terrible top and offend some people. I could be... whatever, it doesn't...
Nothing be beautiful like me and offend people. I mean, it happens.
It does. The idea of offending people. I went out once with my mentor, and we went out and got quite drunk. And we asked people, if you wanted to really offend me right now, what would you say? And there were loads of comments that I didn't expect around the bushiness of my eyebrows. But they didn't say anything like that. I thought, well, that's not offensive. Like, you're just holding back. But they were all drunk, and I was like, come and, like, what's the best you've got? And really, what I learned from that experience...
You must have been drunk to invite that kind of conversation.
I might have done. I might have had a few rums. And it was really... What's interesting is that you can offend... There's always going to be somebody who's going to take offence. So if you try and behave in a way that means you won't cause offence...
To anyone.
Yeah, to anyone. Then it literally means you can't actually open your mouth, because somebody will always be offended somewhere. And actually, maybe you just want to offend the people that aren't your tribe, just to get them out of the way, so that you can bring in...
And actually, do you know what? Again, it takes us back to the being right. If you've offended someone and you realise that you've offended someone, then what's wrong with saying, I'm sorry?
I think it's the energy that you're saying. It's like, when you said that thing, are they being offended because they got some sensitivities that they don't like? They don't like swear words, for example. And so, you weren't being offensive to them directly, but just your use of that word has triggered them in some way. So again, it's the intention behind the communication and the energy with which you were communicating it, as opposed to the thing itself. Because there are lots of people that their very own sensitivities that we can't possibly predict for and make allowances for.
And
everyone.
That's why we always had the all to things. All lives matter. All isms matter. All matter. Which stops us from looking at what the actual issue, the live issue in front of us is. Because, well, if I say that, and if I bring up the most vulnerable and support them, then someone else is going to be really upset that I'm not bringing them up. In the same way, we can't all fight all fronts of all battles, because there's a finite amount of us to go around.
Yeah.
So what we do is we just say, well, actually, rather than committing, rather than speaking up and standing out, I'm just going to stay really quiet so that everybody knows I'm for everybody. But jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fiona's saying, I think that speaking out can make people uncomfortable on multi-levels. It can challenge their own beliefs around whatever it is that you are speaking about.
Yeah.
But it can also make them uncomfortable around their assessment of you as a person. People have to readjust how they see you if you don't fit into their box anymore.
That box fitting. But isn't that box fitting what we're talking about when we talk about not rocking the boat?
Yeah.
About wanting to be liked by everyone, about not losing our followers and our the engagement that we have. And it's true. People okay, let me give you a really simple box that I have always been put in by many white people. You speak really nicely for a black person. What does that even mean? But in the box, they look at me and they make an assumption about my level of education, about my intelligence levels, about where I was brought up or how I was raised or how I carry myself, because I don't fit into their box. And so then they get really uncomfortable. It's like the birth worker who came on my timeline because I jokingly posted, if you see me in a vegan restaurant drinking water,
Call help.
Yes, send in the SWAT team.
Yeah.
And then she proceeded to post all of this meat is murder crap on my timeline, and it's like, well, you are making an assumption that the meat that I eat is low welfare, inhumane meat. You haven't asked me where I source my meat and how I choose the meats that I eat. You have just decided that me making a joke about send help, and seriously, people, if you do see me in
yeah, we will send
order, this is not a drill, people. But so there's an assumption, and you're put into a box. And you're right, Fiona, because then people say, oh, well, now I need to reassess who I think you are because you don't fit my standard of who you are, rather than recognizing that we are all evolving beings, that relationships that work are the ones that grow together and develop together, not the ones that just plod along with no change, because one day a change comes and poof, relationship over,
Yeah. Wilma says, I always ensure that my clients do not feel worse for having worked with me. However, recently I spoke out about a practice at my work, and guess what? They have turned it against me where my work is being scrutinised. Do I care? No. Let them carry on, as my clients are very satisfied.
Well done, Wilma. We're with you. And if you need people to stand at your back, we're going to stand at your back, as long as you're not doing something murderously, terribly awful. And actually, then we might have to stand for the other people. But I'm guessing that you're not. And so we're standing at your back because it's true. And actually, Wilma, that's exactly what we're talking about. Knowing that the place where you are is solid ground. Knowing that your work is speaking for itself. Your reputation is speaking for itself. And knowing that, the shitstorm is coming, but I can withstand that, actually, because it is a defensiveness from people who have been challenged.
Yeah. And bully-esque. There's a little bit of bullying going on there, I think, as well.
Let's coerce you. Let's bully you into coming back into line, to being dull and grey like the rest of us, rather than standing out with a spark of colour.
And showing everybody else, this is what happens when you do step out of line. You don't want to be treated like this, so make sure that you guys don't do that too. Because
what does it do? It shines a light. And what does the darkness hate?
The light.
Because it goes into the corners. It shows the things that are hidden. In birth work, before partners were allowed into the birthing space, bad practice, bullying and assault and really awful things were happening to birthing women. Then partners came in and that went down. And then it got to the place where actually, everyone is used to this now, so we can bring in some bad practice because no one knows what it's like. What's happened during the COVID period with the doulas and the other birth support partners being unallowed in, even the actual partner of the birthing person not being allowed in, is lots of bad practice has been happening because there's no one to bear witness. So what you're doing when you stand out, when you step up, is you're shining a light, and the darkness and bad practice does not like that light.
Well, you're calling them to account as well. And so I think there's a lot of uncomfortableness with them thinking, well, hang on a
Yeah.
minute, this could come back to us. We need to push back
Yes.
before it can come back to us.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people trying to maintain the status quo that needs to be disrupted. And I find the current times we're in quite exciting on that front, because it looks like there's lots of shaking of the tree going on and lots of things being dismantled. And I just think we just need to keep on with that to make sure that it carries on.
And to talk a little further into that, being able to speak up and stand out is a privilege. Because within the birth world, the black and brown people who are speaking up and standing out are being attacked left, right, and centre. Mm. So this is where you use your privilege, your ability to stand out. This is when you shake off your discomfort and you stand beside them. So, you heard me a few minutes ago saying, it's all right, Wilma, we're going to stand behind you. But that's what we need. Maybe that's what your speaking up and standing out is doing. Standing beside someone or behind someone who is going to be battered just for the dint of what they look like, not because the things that they're doing are wrong. Mm. This is when you stand up and say, so there's a wonderful midwife that has a black student midwife who's done a lot of campaigning to change the name of the Mongolian blue spot because it's racist and derogatory. So it's now called a blue-grey spot. And instead of amplifying her work and saying, this student midwife started this and this was my action from it and things have changed and I'm part of that change, when you stand up and you say, oh yes, I wrote this letter, I did this thing, and therefore it was changed, they listened to us. So the person that's doing the uncomfortable thing, that's standing up and being challenged by the doctors and medics, totally ridiculous, it's stupid, there's nothing wrong with that term, we can use that term as much as we like. Instead of standing up and standing with and standing for them and using your privilege, you just sit quietly. And when it changes, you say, oh, I wrote a letter. Mm.
Yeah. Siobhan is saying, speaking out can get responses such as, you're scary, you're aggressive.
That's really a black woman who's 53. Born.
I get that stuff all the time. But I don't think that guys get those names in the way that women do they?
So then that's what we have to challenge. You're being aggressive. Are you saying that because I'm a woman?
Yeah.
Are you saying that because I'm a black woman? Are you saying that because it makes you feel uncomfortable? If I was a man and I said that, if I was a white man and I said that, how would your response change? We have to call people on these things and we have to call them on it at the time because it's so ingrained that people don't realise it.
And I think a lot of people feel a lot of shame around aggressive behaviour or bossy behaviour, or, these words that are very much used towards, young girls. Like, when you see, I've got two daughters, so I'm conscious of how, and I know when I was a young kid, I was always called bossy. I was always bossing my brother about. And it's like, but you never hear that term described for a little boy who might be bossy. He's, and then again, how the language just shapes him. And how
he understands how to take control.
Yes,
he knows to shape. He knows how to move forward.
Exactly. And I think, so some women therefore feel shame around being perceived as bossy or aggressive or scary, and therefore play small, pull that back, don't do that as much because they don't want to get that name. And they've been trying not to be called that because they heard it so much as kids or young adults. And what I'd like to say is, do what you can to get that name. Like, be bossy, own it, be aggressive, because actually it is just a label that's being applied.
Yes. Where have revolutions come from? Revolutions have come from women who won't stay silent.
Yes.
Women who won't stay in that box. Women that won't do the feminine thing. Who the hell defines what feminine is? Oh, wait, men. So the civil rights movement, both in the States and both over here, started by black women. Mm. But when we look back, history tells us it was started by men, owned by men, run by men. And the only pictures that we see of the women are the docile, the ones that are in a docile position, not that the position they took was docile. So Rosa Parks sitting on a bus, you see, she did it the gentle, quiet, feminine way. No knowledge about the work and the campaigning and the marching and the stuff that she did prior to and post that. and the other women who spoke out and did that stuff before her, we just keep to see, this is how you do it. Just shh. And things will change.
No, they won't.
No.
So we're saying own your bossiness, own your aggression. Not that it is aggression, but yeah, we've got Fiona saying we have to change the language, assertive, confident, strong. Absolutely. But I'm also saying don't buy into the negativity, the negative associations with some of the language that you're receiving, and just own it and go, yeah, and like just own it.
It brings to mind that phrase, history is rarely created by well-behaved women. And I realise that I have an absolute and complete and total issue with that sentence.
Okay.
Who the hell defines well-behaved? What does the word well-behaved mean? Because I think those women that disrupted, that caused revolution, were bloody well-behaved and probably better behaved than the people around them. So what does well-behaved mean? Oh, wait, it means docile.
Not rocking the boat.
Quiet. It means staying in the box, not rocking the boat. Yeah. So what do we mean when we say these words? And then let's look, and you're right, let's reframe the language. What does aggressive actually mean? And what does assertive and confident mean? Because I think, in the words of my most favourite films, The Princess Bride, I do not think that word means what you think it means.
Yeah.
God, so glad I got Princess Bride reference in there. Yes.
Now, again, we've been talking for ages, so I just feel like we need to wrap up the conversation because it's coming up to 10 to 4 UK time, which is where we're at today. So if anybody has any other comments or things that you want to share just as part of this conversation, then please do pop them in the chat as we want to try and wrap up this conversation. Is there, when we sat down originally, Mars, and said, let's talk about this, is there anything that you felt that was part of this conversation that we maybe haven't mentioned yet that we should?
I genuinely think we need to define for ourselves what speaking up means. Yeah. What does speaking up actually mean? And we talked at the beginning about what these things weren't. So I would love for the people commenting, the people listening to this call, to say what speaking up means. And then, again, define, what does standing out mean? I know what I think it means. I'm reasonably convinced I know what you think it means, Alexia, but I would love to know what people in the community think these things mean and what they mean for themselves, because perhaps those words don't mean what they think they mean.
And I think they will mean different things to different people. And what it takes for me to speak up will be very different from what it takes for you to speak up. And what it takes for me to stand out will be very different. It's not going to be this cookie cutter approach where we can just no, that's not for me. That's not my door opening. It's not like I can say, well, no, to speak up, Mars, you need to do this thing. This is what I did, and that's just going to work for you too. Because it's not. It's going to be a very unique approach, which there will be some common themes that we can all buy into. But actually, it's a very individual journey in terms of what it's going to take for me to speak up and for me to stand out, because I want to stand out in a way that's authentic and right for me, that enables me to stand in my power and for me to be authentically me. And that's not going to be the same for you, is it?
Let's make that easy for birth workers. So just because this form of pain management worked for you doesn't mean it will work for your client. Just because this method of breathing worked for you doesn't mean it will work for your client. Just because forming your birth plan this way doesn't mean that forming it that way is going to work for your client. One of the things that we're constantly talking about is supporting someone else's journey and making sure to debrief our own birthing experiences, our own postnatal, postpartum experiences, and putting them to the side so that the person that we're supporting walks in their own truth and find their own power. So, of course, there's no, that's the simple example for why this stuff isn't cookie cutter stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you find it? And how do you define what speaking up means to you and what standing out means to you. And we can't tell you this, but you can tell us. So what are you going to tell us?
And this is something that we're going to be diving into in our masterclass, isn't it? We've got a whole masterclass. The masterclass we've described to you at the beginning of this conversation. We're designing a series of masterclass experiences that enable you to integrate some of the key themes that we're talking about in a very real, practical way, so that we can really dig deep into what standing out will mean for you, how you can get rid of all of the fears that are preventing you from truly speaking up and standing out. So if this is something that you're interested in really assimilating and integrating fully into the rebirth of you as a professional, then do sign up to join the waiting list, which I will be sharing a link soon. I've got Wilma.
We are going to go into it really deeply, and make no mistake, you will feel uncomfortable, but the transformation and the change will make the discomfort seem like that bee sting that you forgot from years ago.
Yeah, because there is a journey. I've just shared the link for everybody who wants to join the masterclass wait list. But that journey does involve, it is a little bit like you are on a shore and you can see the other shore, and at some point you have to just get in the boat and leave one shore, and you're in the middle of the sea between both, and it is a little bit of a rocky journey. You do reach a point where you think, oh my goodness, am I going to sink this boat? It's too far for me to go back. I'm going to have to keep going, and it is uncomfortable and scary, but my goodness, it's a journey that you need to go to grow as a person, to grow as an individual. That's really
where growth comes from.
Exactly, and you can't grow if you're not growing. You're contracting.
Doesn't a seed need to break out of a shell?
Exactly.
Doesn't that same seed need to push through the earth and break through the top? It's a constant motion. It's a not staying still.
Yeah.
So we don't promise it will be easy, but we do promise it will be worth it.
And fun.
Well, it's you and me. How could it not be fun? Just uncork your bottle of red. Let's go.
So the waitlist link is in the comments if you want to join the masterclass waitlist, where you'll be the first to find out about it. We've got Wilma saying, "Hi Mars, I want to train as a doula. How do I go about it?" Train with Mars. We've got a link.
Support at abueladoulas.com.
We'll put a link.
You can pop that in.
We'll get a link in the comments once we finish the chat. We can go back.
Sure, come and train with us. Let's change the birth world. Let's see reproductive justice. Come along and train with me, where all of this stuff isn't bolt on. All of this thing is embedded through our very course.
Yeah, because I think birth work does need to evolve, does need to move on, and the people that can lead that change are those that are working in it. Yes. Because that's where the changes are going to come. It's from people like you and I, Mars. It's the people that we can bring along on the journey. And so it's not going to change on its own. You can't be a passive bystander and expect it to change. If you want to make the change, you've got to be part of it. And that's what we want to invite you to do, is be part of that change. And to do that from a place of solidity and have a rock solid foundation where you feel unshakable and unwavering in your new way. Yeah. So I think that might be a good place to end the chat for today. What do you think, Mars? Anything else we need to say?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm really looking forward over the next sort of 23 hours or so to seeing what comments come up in the chat and to respond to them. But really, if you are serious about wanting change, and here comes the plug again, but if you're serious about wanting to make that change within yourself, within your practice, to see the systems and the structures around you change, then seriously, you need to get into this conversation deeply with us. Yeah. And we're not holding anything back, because we're doing this because we desire to see the change. So we are speaking up and standing out.
Yeah. We want to bring you with us. So thank you for joining. Thank you for watching, everybody. Keep your comments coming. Mars and I will be keeping an eye on the chat over the next 24 hours before we pull the conversation down. So if anybody else you think would benefit from watching this conversation, then please do invite them. They've got 24 hours to watch this conversation before it gets pulled down from Facebook. Okay, thank you everybody for watching, and see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.